shining star out of me.
Hello and welcome to Meet Me at the Movies. I am Noel T. Manning II. We really appreciate you spending time with us today. We dive into movie reviews, we do interviews, and we do a heck of a lot more. We have hot topics from time to time, and today a hot topic is an interview. Very happy to have Gabe Polsky as our guest. Gabe, you are a writer, a director. You've done some pretty amazing documentaries in your life, and one we're going to talk about today is called Red Penguins. And I got to tell you, I was pretty enthralled with this. But first, I want to just say thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, me too, Noel. It's great talking to you.
Well, this movie, Red Penguins, it is one part about sports, but there's a huge backdrop of history tied into this. And you're no stranger to documentaries on sports and weaving in history as well. Talk a little bit about your background in cinema and documentary to kind of set things up for those that may not be familiar with your work.
Yeah, so I originally started more on the producing side in film and made a number of movies. One of them's called Bad Lieutenant with Nick Cage. I was involved with the Genius series on Nat Geo, executive produced the Albert Einstein series, and I basically, and I directed a film called The Motel Life, which was a feature film with Emile Hirsch and Dakota Fanning, kind of an independent story about brothers on the run. And then, I've always really been interested in documentaries, we actually, my brother and I made one called His Way that was nominated for an Emmy for HBO, and I'd seen that kind of the whole process of that. And I always felt, look, I would really like to, direct one of those. And I think I could really do a really good job. Now in college, I went to Yale and I studied political science, and I also have a sports background. I played hockey in college as Division I. And so I kind of somehow blended a lot of things that I knew, and my parents are from the former Soviet Union. They're immigrants. They came over in 1976. And so I kind of saw that, and, Russian was my first language, and now I'm like terrible at it. But anyways, so I decided to kind of take the leap. And I think that's kind of what people do when they want to try something. And I said, I want to make a documentary. And the first one I made was called Red Army, and it was about kind of the epic rise and fall of the Soviet Union, told through this great sports dynasty, the Red Army hockey team, which kind of dominated hockey for, 40 years or so. And I used kind of the team, and particularly the captain of the team, Slav Fetisov, as kind of a vehicle to tell the story of really kind of Russia, the rise and fall of the Soviet Union. I like to have many layers in my films. I like to have humor. I like to entertain. I like to have some action, and so that's kind of my nature, and I like to bring humor. And then I made a film called In Search of Greatness, which is about the greatest athletes of all time, and about kind of the nature of creativity and how these athletes like Michael Jordan, Pelé, Jerry Rice, Wayne Gretzky, Tom Brady, how they became who they were. And it's very, the answer is kind of counterintuitive. It's not kind of, these athletes are a lot less physically superior than, let's say, the average athlete in their sport. They use their weakness, transformed it, and used their creativity to kind of excel. And so that's what that was about. And then finally, Red Penguins, I was approached by this strange guy after a screening in New York Film Festival for Red Army. And this guy came up to me and said, I've got the craziest story. You won't believe it. It's about this team in Russia, this Red Army team, and all the crazy stuff that was happening in the 90s. And I kind of, was really reluctant to even consider anything about Russia and hockey, because I felt like I'd already captured that. I did kind of my piece on that. But the more I kind of looked into it, over actually a couple of years, I was so reluctant. The more I looked at it, I said, man, somebody's got to tell this story. This is so crazy. It's so it's such a unique period in history when the Soviet Union collapsed, in the 90s in Russia, violence and lawlessness and just craziness, and about a country trying to find its identity and And this happened to be just one of the crazy stories that also involved this famous Red Army hockey team. Again, they went from being the greatest team in history to virtually extinct within a year. And this American team, the Pittsburgh Penguins of the NHL, basically bought the team. And the whole story is about this experiment in the 90s and how the Americans came over to Russia and tried to rejuvenate this whole franchise.
It was quite amazing to watch this documentary, Red Penguins. And sure, there's some overlap between this and Red Army, but it is a completely different chapter and looking at things in a whole different way, especially that snapshot of time. And I showed you this before we went on the air. I was in Russia in '92, and so it was kind of in the middle of some of these things starting to happen, and watching the footage. And I got to say, amazing footage that you found, the archival footage, the interviews that you were able to pull together from those who were there, and then even looking at the news archives and the news commentators. You did such an amazing job setting up this piece, and I'm going to say it was just fascinating, and it took me back because there were things that I remembered quite well, but there were a lot of things I didn't know about that were going on that your documentary put within context of what I could have experienced during my time there. I was there for a month doing some study abroad, and I learned a lot about my culture, but I also learned a lot about the things that we as humanity have in common, and that we forget sometimes, no matter where we're from, those similarities. But your piece felt so authentic. It felt so natural. And you talk about weaving the humor into things. Humor is a part of our lives. And that's what I love about your documentaries is as I'm watching them, I don't feel like I'm being talked to. I feel like I'm in a dialogue. I feel like I'm spending time with somebody, learning and listening. And I just want to thank you for that. So for you, Russia has always been a part of your background. Do you remember the first time you went and visited this piece of your homeland, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, my parents are from the Ukraine, so it was all related then. But I went to Ukraine in 1987 just to visit sort of grandparents and see them for the first time, and then I think I went in my life sort of a few more times after that. 2 times to for filmmaking reasons. But I'm not to be honest with you, I'm not obsessed with the culture or somehow, there are these, people that are like Russophiles, or they just love everything about it. I mean, I do love some of the literature, and, they've got great, writers and some filmmakers, but it just, I don't know, that this happened kind of naturally. I am interested in politics, and because Russia's such a strange country and dramatic in a lot of ways and weird, I don't know, it was interesting to explore that, kind of take it another step further with Red Penguins. And I can't say that I'm going to be a specialist in that area. I mean, I do think that there are some, I think the oligarchs are an interesting period too, even after, and there's a lot of interesting drama there, but yeah.
Yeah. So when you first heard this story, did you think it was real? Did you think it was something was made up, or had you already heard elements of that as actual fact?
Well, I had heard that there, I had seen some of the news coverage about just that they were doing this thing in Russia, and it seemed to be successful. But that's all anyone knew. If you know anything, period. Most people, even the most avid hockey fanatics, it's not really a hockey film, but they knew nothing about this story. Most people, even if you knew something, it was normally just positive and whatever. But when you started to dig in, you realize that, wow, they were keeping a lot from other, from the public, that things were really kind of shady and crazy over there, and didn't end well, but I don't think they wanted the public to know that, because still in the 90s they wanted people to feel like there was a lot of opportunity and promise between the two countries. If we just said, oh no, it's so screwed up over there and they're stealing and let's get the hell out of here, then the relations between the countries would be worse, you know? So they kept a lot of that way. When I started to uncover what actually happened, it was just fascinating and kind of funny in a dark way. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, it's honestly bizarre. I mean, the things that you offered and the things that you shared, you look at it, and I think in one form or fashion, behind me, I've got an XFL football, the Extreme Football League, and it felt like that's what was happening in this ice hockey arena, the Ice Palace, in so many forms and fashions. And man, the interviews that you were able to gather, you know, those who were there, who remembered it, and they were open and honest with you, it sounded like, as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, if people are to wonder, you know, what would it be like if America, and I know a lot of people are thinking this nowadays, like if we just, our system collapses or you know, it's anarchy. Everyone has that in the back of their minds, you know, this is what happens. This is what it looks like. You know, now the technology is a little bit better, but I mean, you know, without laws and without law enforcement, you know, this is kind of what happens and how people manage to survive and what they do. And, you know, that was that period of time. It's just fascinating. In terms of like people being open and to interviews, yeah, most people were even like the KGB prosecutor and the businessman. Yeah, I mean, that's part of like how to be a good filmmaker is to make people comfortable, and maybe it's not a trick, but just get them to open up and just, you know, give you interesting information or looks or reactions, you know. And I think, but some of the guys were a little bit paranoid and didn't know what I was doing, but then they would open up and laugh. I mean, you got to work your way around psychology, you know.
Yeah. Well, it definitely worked in this film. The film is Red Penguins, and from a filmmaker standpoint, how long before you were approached that you said, okay, yeah, I'm gonna do something on this. I've got to do something on this. And then how long was that process before we're now getting a chance to see it on film?
Oh, it was a long time because, and to tell you the real story, you know, Steve Warshaw basically sent over a whole box of material, a huge box. It was, you know, documents and videos and contracts, everything. And I didn't look at it for almost, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 months. And then my wife was cleaning out the house and said, I'm going to throw this box away. And I felt guilty. So I started looking through it and I was like, oh, wow, this is crazy. Wow, I even showed it to her and she thought it was crazy and that I should do it. But again, I put it away, wasn't interested for months and months. And then finally, I decided that, okay, well, you know, because I wasn't doing anything for a few months, and I said, well, let me see what I can get with Steve Warshaw. I'll interview him, and if this guy's really good, then at least I know I have a film or I don't. So I put an interview session together with a camera and a crew in New York, and interviewed Steve, and he sat down for 4 or 5 hours and essentially did that. And I said, okay, you know, we've got something here, but you know, I still I put some promotional material, like a trailer together, and then tried to raise some money with it. I was a little bit unsuccessful for a while in terms of the U.S. You know, buyers and Netflix and so on. So I had to get some foreign money. But anyways, that's when it all kind of started to go. So when I was unsuccessful, with the trailer things and all that, and I was like, oh God, you know, I guess I'm not going to make this movie. I've got all this great footage. But then I was in Russia, in Georgia, with it wasn't, Georgia's a different country, but in the country of Georgia, it was near Moscow. And I decided, because I was close by, well, you know, I'm kind of close, so maybe I should kind of swing over there and see what I can get. Maybe I get some interviews, you know? And so I basically like called my guy over there in Russia who kind of finds people. And I said, do you think we could, you know, find all these people? You know, should I come? I'm nearby. Should I come? He said, well, let's see what we could do. So I got a traveler's visa and showed up there and basically holed up in a hotel waiting for these interviews to come. So essentially, one by one, they started coming, and we got a van and a small crew, and just we're driving all over Moscow looking for crazy people to interview.
That is amazing. So,
Yeah.
so on a
I had no
whim,
idea
wow.
who I was gonna get, what I was gonna do. You know,
Wow. Well, even if you,
sometimes you gotta in life, you gotta take that step. You gotta just have faith that you're gonna get something interesting. You gotta have confidence and faith.
yeah. Well, even if you had only had Steve, what he brought to the table and what he brought, just his enthusiasm, his
Yeah.
energy, and his craziness really did shine through. His personality shined through without a doubt on this documentary. That's amazing. I love that
I think
story.
you gotta in documentaries, you gotta take that first step and see, okay, there's some, Steve, I've got the story. I know what it is, because he kind of told the whole story. He was there from the beginning to the end. And then you kind of know, okay, this is a good story. This is a
Right.
great, and Steve is a great character to take us through,
Yes.
that gave me confidence to take another step. So you don't just say, oh, I'm spending all the money and that's it. But you take one step at a time,
Yeah, yeah. Well, it really did come through, and you're also no stranger to finding the archive footage that works and the process that goes behind the scenes to make that happen. But just excellent job. The editing was spectacular as well. Uh, the narrative flow, everything just really clicked for me in this documentary.
And
And
Noel, the way that I approach interviews, you said that some guys are, it seems like they're opening up. Like, I feel that every human being you can relate to, has something about them that's interesting, and you just got to get to that. You got to get to that human part that's a little, there's something there that everyone has their own quirkiness. You know what I'm saying?
oh
And if you could
yes.
bring that out a little bit, and that's what I like to do in my films, is bring out these sort of strange personality things.
Well, you nailed it. I mean,
Like if you look
everybody.
at every character in Red Penguins, they're all sort of a little bit wacky in a way, you know?
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Well, when you think about it, we're all a little wacky in a
Yeah,
way.
we are.
It's a chance. Everybody does have a story to tell, and everybody has something unique about
Yeah,
them if you take the time to get to know them. And
yeah.
that really did shine through in Red Penguins. What are you hoping that audiences will gain from this? If there's one hope that you have, what would that be?
If there's one, well, maybe two. One is after they watch it, they say, "Wow, that was a hell of a ride." And so that's entertainment value.
Right?
I want them to feel, "Wow, that was a great uh, spending of my time." The second thing is that by I really feel that, first of all, there's very few, if any, great movies about Russia or the culture that let's say are made by Americans, or that really you get to understand the culture and the people. Um, and I hope that this film allows people to kind of understand that the culture better, and the sort of psychology, the mentality, and maybe why, and think about it.
Yeah, it's an amazing documentary. Really appreciate you taking the time today to spend with us talking about it and some of the craziness behind the scenes that made this happen. If you're out there and you haven't had a chance to check out Red Penguins, please do. Find it any way you can. And Gabe Polsky. Gabe, any final thoughts, any final comments that you want to make sure you share with our audience here on Meet Me at the Movies?
Not really, but it's available on August 4th. On basically every platform for rental or sale, or even on cable on demand. So it's available everywhere pretty much, except streaming. That'll come later.
Yeah, awesome. Gabe, thanks for your time. And thanks for everyone who spent time with us here on Meet Me at the Movies. And Gabe, if people wanted to follow your work, what's the best way they can do that?
I think just Google. I'm not very active on social media, so I Google.
Google is your friend. Gabe, thanks for taking the time again today to spend
Thanks,
with
Noel.
us.
Have a good one.